Hello, it's ElectraSnow and it's time for another Halloween transformation. Now this little vampire was inspired by ball jointed dolls because they have a very unique paintwork, and this is probably my most favourite look I've ever created. For my foundation colour, I started out by applying MAC full coverage foundation in white to achieve a nice pale porcelain skin tone. BJDs are usually very pale, and this white foundation is perfect for achieving that flawless doll-like complexion. I applied a heavy layer of that white foundation all over my face, and then I went in with the Ben 9 Neutral Set colourless face powder to set it all in place. To get white foundation looking good, you need good moisturised skin to start with and a heavy layer of powder. Here I'm going in and I'm mixing up liquid latex with a white cream face paint, and the reason why I'm mixing these two things together is so that when the latex dries down it has a slightly paler cast to it, because sometimes latex can dry quite yellowy, so by mixing that little bit of face paint in, it just helps so it dries down and it looks a little bit more like the skin tone we've applied. Once I had those two products mixed up, I started out by applying it down where I wanted the slash to be across the face. Now this has been taken from a reference photo of a ball jointed doll that I have seen, and I will leave the artist down below. Ball jointed dolls have been something that have always inspired me because they are so stunningly beautiful, and they are basically like living anime dolls, if that makes any sense. They are absolutely stunning to me and are so unique in the way they look. So when I saw that image of that doll, I was like, right, I want to transform that into a real life makeup look and also add in a little bit of vampness to it as well. Now you've seen me do this in many of my videos, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but where I laid down the latex, I just started pushing cotton wool into it, getting it saturated and moulding it and shaping it into the wound that I wanted. And to get the slashed open cut wound, I went in with some eyelash tweezers and I used them to try and break through the latex into the centre of it just before it was dried down fully, so I could get a nice deep cut. And with the remaining white latex mix that I had left over, I went round all the edges to blend it into the skin as best as possible. Now if you was recreating this, I would probably recommend that you created a sculpt out of this wound, so you use some clay to create this and then cast it out of latex, just because that would give a better result, but applying it to the skin is a lot less time consuming, and I like to have the creative freedom of changing things up if I see things I don't like as I'm going along. Once the latex has fully dried down, you can see it still has a slight yellow cast, so I went over it again with that white full coverage foundation. It's very hard to see because everything's so white, but it's basically just a sword or a knife slash across the face. And later on I do go in to accommodate the little areas where it would be the high points and low points of the face, so how the wound would look realistically, and I'll show you that when we get there. But now it's time to get gory and start adding in some details, and to start off I'm going to be going into the open part of that wound, and I'm going to be applying a water activated red grimace face paint. Now that's the closest thing I had to hand, but it doesn't have to be a face paint. You can use anything that's red, so a lipstick or a cream paint, anything at all that will just give that effect of the bloody open wound. Next I'm going in and I'm starting to define the eyes, and I'm using the Inglot shade in 344, and I'm using that shade to basically carve out a brow structure on the face. BJDs have a very unique paint job that makes them look like they're blushing. They have this blush that's applied in certain parts of the face which really brings out the way that they look, and it's very unique and specific to a BJD. So if you go and check them out, you'll see what I'm talking about, and I'm basically going to be using this shadow all over my face in certain areas to create that blushing look. The whole essence of this look is recreating the way BJDs are painted with makeup to give that effect on a human face, and using that one tone to define and shape down the features to look a little bit more doll-like. Now despite the fact that some paint jobs on BJDs can get quite intricate, their face tones are usually done with one or two shades. So this is a case of going in with the face here and applying that one shade in certain areas and building up the intensity until I'm happy with it. If I did have an airbrush system, I would err to using that a lot more than I do a brush, because an airbrush is a lot better at diffusing that colour than a stiff brush, and it gives a better effect. But unfortunately I've not got one of them. Very much unlike mine, their noses are very small and delicate, so the nose contour is extremely important for this look. So here I'm going in with MAC Studio Fix Powder Foundation in Shivering White, and I'm using it to apply highlights in certain parts of the nose on areas that I don't have, that things don't exist. So I'm going to be creating highlight and contour to define my nose to be as delicate and as small and as doll-like as I can possibly get it, without running for a rhinoplasty just yet. And to keep the blushing effect for my contour, I'm using that same 344 shade by Inglot, taking that down the sides of my nose to really slim it down, and then going over the areas in the face to define the features even further and add to the blush. In the same palette that I made from Inglot, I'm taking the shade 308 and I'm using this purpley colour to define through my crease. The dolls usually have very large deep set eyes, so this will just help to sell that look. At this point I wasn't entirely happy with how the face was looking because unfortunately I'm human and I do have skin texture and these dolls don't, so I made a point of going back over all of my details and blending them out just a little bit more. And here's the part I mentioned earlier where I go back into that cut and accommodate for the high and low points of the face. I did just do this one straight slash across the face, and if a knife did that it wouldn't necessarily make this straight line unless it went really deep. It would kind of have these little areas where it missed, because obviously there's a high point where the bridge of the nose is, so I just took a little bit more liquid latex and cotton wool and I applied it to these two places just to give it a little bit more dimension because the attention's in the details and it wouldn't just be one straight line. For the brows, I'm using another Inglot eyeshadow in the shade 363, and my preference, what I really do like on these dolls, is the straighter brows, but they do have very different brows. They can be all different shapes and sizes. It's just what you like, and you can draw whatever shape that it is that you prefer. Now the brow on the other side, being as there's a lot of liquid latex there, was quite hard to draw, but this is the best it came out. To keep that big dolly eye expression, I went back over the lid just itself with that MAC Shivering white, and I just applied that to the very lid, not going into the crease, not really cutting the crease to get a nice sharp line, but just making sure that the lid itself was just white skin tone. A doll or a human is nothing without eyeliner, and I'm using the shade 62 by Inglot just to make a very fine black line across my lashes. And with that vampire concept still in mind, I went back in with this red shade just in the tear duct. This is in the shade 296. I just wanted to give the kind of bloodshot, bit more demonic kind of look to his face. These dolls' eyes are perfect in every way, so of course I've got to use mascara, and I'm going in with the Maybelline Colossal and I'm giving a good generous coating on my top and bottom lashes. And now for my favourite part, and the first time I've used it this Halloween, blood. This is Mehron Stage Blood and it's in the darker shade, so it's perfect for really gory, heavily bloodied looks. So I'm going to be taking this all the way through the wound and putting it in the lowest parts where I'd want the blood to be pooling to start dripping down the face. Now this is a little bit of a tedious thing and it takes a little bit of time. You don't necessarily want to apply too much because otherwise the whole face will get covered in blood. You just want to apply it in certain low points so it starts to pool and then starts to drip down the face, because that will make it look the most realistic. You want to try and keep your face as natural and straight as possible when this is happening, just so gravity can take its course and pull that blood down exactly as it would happen if this was a real wound. Now this blood is extremely messy and it stains anything that it touches pretty much, so I didn't want to flick this about too much, so I just went in with a little bit of my finger and stippled that over the areas of the wound where I wanted to have the blood splatter. Now I would recommend using a sea sponge or even flicking it onto the face to give it a real proper realistic look, but this is the most easiest on cleanup. Now applying this to the lips doesn't last very long, it's definitely not got the staying power as a lipstick, and I did contemplate doing a red lip with this or doing a nice ombre lip, but I thought no, let's keep it all on the bloody side and make it look like he's just bitten somebody while we're at it. And that finishes off all the bloodiness. The final part to do is just go in with a black eye pencil, and this is a Rimmel Black Magic Eye Kohl, and I apply that just in the waterline. I threw in a white wig, which had a bit of trouble styling, I'll be honest, some vampire teeth, and that is his BJD inspired vampire complete. As always, there will be a list of all the products used in this video down below, and I'll also link the contact lenses, the wig and the vampire teeth. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, bye bye.